Hello, I'm Joan from the Spokane County Historical Society, Director of the Cheney Historical Museum. And today, this story is going to be about when Cheney became the Spokane County seat. Now, you may have heard of the Big Steal. Well, that's from Spokane's perspective, but I'm going to tell you the tale of two different steals from Cheney's perspective. Back in 1878. Stevens County was really big, and Colville, way up here in the corner, was the county seat. Now, for historical accuracy, there was a Spokane County before, which was also really big, back in 1853 when Washington Territory was created. But it was broken up into parts over the years, and so here we are in 1878 being part of the really big Stevens County. There was a small but growing number of people who were coming into our future town site area with pine trees covering the hillside. Now, people all through the county, they know that the Northern Pacific Railroad is coming. They know where it will be going, so they know that route. At that time, we're known as Section 13 or Big Springs, and later in the year, briefly were called Cronks. Now, the main players of this early part of the story are James Glover on the left. He's a Spokan Falls successful businessman and a Stevens County Justice of the Peace. On the right, Daniel F. Percival is my favorite uncelebrated man of our history. He's a Civil War veteran, runs a very successful stock operation south of what will become our town, and he is a Stevens County Commissioner as well as a representative in the Washington Territorial Legislature. Now, Mr. Glover goes to Olympia and spends a great deal of his own money wining and dining and lobbying the legislators to get a new Spokane County carved out of that large Stevens County. Now, many of the West Side representatives don't see the need, but he does find an ally in Mr. Percival, and together they work on getting this done. Now, it's Percival who introduces the bill to recreate Spokane County, even though Mr. Glover takes credit for it later on. But he tells the legislature that there is a growing population in the southern and western parts of this large county, and that traveling to Colville is just too far and too difficult in order for farmers, homesteaders, and businessmen to conduct their legal business with the county. And with the regular legislative wrangling, the legislation is approved in October with two criteria attached: that there be an election in December to select a temporary set of county commissioners and officials to get things rolling, and the county seat is temporarily set at Spokan Falls, with a permanent location to be determined along with the full-term set of commissioners and officials in an election in November of 1880. Now, the outline of this new county follows the Columbia River and then jogs out and around Whitman County. You can kind of see here the lines of the Spokane County that we know today, but then it continues on out covering what will become Lincoln and Douglas counties in the future. On May 27, 1880, about 40 men met at Marshall to select suitable site options for the permanent county seat. Spokan Falls is mentioned for its wealth and beauty, Medical Lake, which rivals the falls in beauty, Marshall as a natural outlet, and the fact that it's on a number of trails connecting the various places in the county. Spangle is a leading business center, and Depot Springs, as it's now being called, as the best access and shipping point in the county. Augusta is the prettiest and most central of places on the Northern Pacific Railroad line for the new county. And here we go back to the map just for a quick reminder. Spokan Falls is up here. There's Marshall, Spangle, Cheney, Medical Lake, and down here is Augusta. In July 1880, the delegates meet at Depot Springs at the home of John Lemon, fellow over here on the left. Only 3 precincts were missing, including Spokan Falls, who appeared to feel as though the outcome of the election was already guaranteed in their favor. Again, the delegates discussed the pros and cons of each site. Now, the Northern Pacific Railroad agent Alex Abernathy, fellow on the right here, says that Depot Springs has the easiest access to the most people of anywhere in the county, and he offers to write to the railroad officials about donating land for the government buildings. Now, just to note that the town of Depot Springs, what will become Cheney, is in Section 13, which is one of the odd-numbered sections that the United States government gave to the railroad for them to sell to finance constructions. So the railroad owns the land that the town site is on and can do with it as it wants. Also, during that summer of 1880, the track bed is being graded through Augusta up through Tyler, Depot Springs, Marshall, and Spokan Falls. Our town site is being platted in alignment with the railroad, and the delegates at that meeting at Mr. Lemon's house unanimously support Depot Springs as the site they would pick for the county seat. That July meeting kicks off the battle in the press. We have on one side Francis Cook, editor of the Spokane Times. He fires off the first volley, assuring residents that the delegate meeting is of little concern, but that there are just a few folks who are all agitated, believing that acquiring the county seat location would be of financial benefit to them. But it's just a waste of time. The county seat is not going anywhere. On the other side, we have Lucien Kellogg publishing the Northwest Tribune from Colfax at this time. He had attended the meeting in July of the delegates, and while claiming that his reporting is an impartial report of events, he does include an editorial in the paper supporting the reasoning and the delegates' view that Depot Springs has the most to offer. A few back and forths in September, but in October things heat up. Cook writes an editorial describing a pleasant trip through Marshall, stumbling into Cheney without even knowing it, and then says about the town residents, "We never met a more confident set of men in all our travels. They seem to expect to paralyze Spangle, Four Lake City, Medical Lake, and Deep Creek by taking all of their trade." He then charges that no one in Cheney has any clear title to the land there. It is absurd, he says, to think voters would consent to place their county buildings or public records upon ground for which no deed can be given. Well, it's this time the Northern Pacific Railroad agent, Mr. Abernathy, writes a letter contradicting Mr. Cook's statement and assuring them that all the land in Cheney has been properly recorded and sold by himself for the railroad. Mr. Kellogg, now publishing his Northwest Tribune newspaper in Cheney, responds criticizing Mr. Cook for failing to mention the very steep hill one must negotiate between Spokan Falls and Hangman Valley, the bridge over Hangman Creek, which is frequently unusable, and that fording the creek is only an option during some seasons, all of which the teams and wagons must pass over to reach Spokan Falls. In October, on the 13th, Kellogg publishes a letter from a Spring Valley farmer who says, "Many of us farmers here in Spring Valley wear our slouch hats and ragged clothes and drive our cayuse teams. but we know the difference between hauling a load of wheat up Hangman Creek Hill to Spokan Falls, especially in the spring of the year when the bridge is gone, and going over 1/2 the distance over level ground to Cheney. Now, we don't care who owns the town or what the title is, if there is a town where we can sell our produce and do our county business at the same time. Now, Mr. Cook continues his ridicule of Cheney using uncomplimentary epithets and saying that Cheney was making wild claims and promises, but that Spokan Falls will easily win. Ah, rapscallions, mischief makers and scallywags of Cheney. But the Northern Pacific Railroad comes back and weighs in on the Cheney side in October 29th by publicly offering to donate 2 blocks of prime land within the town site for the county buildings in Cheney. Now, there are 3 key choices on the ballot in 1880: the location of the county seat, and the temporary auditor James Nosler versus William H. Bishop, and a fellow whose name doesn't seem to make it into the papers versus Michael Sullivan for sheriff. Now, heavy snows during the week of the election caused delays in getting those ballots and their reports from the precincts throughout the Spokane County over to Spokan Falls. So it wasn't until 10 days later that the canvassing board has all of the ballots so that they can actually meet for the count. Now we have the first steal. Temporary auditor James Nosler, who was on the ballot seeking to keep his job, is also the head of the canvassing board. And while the count numbers were that Cheney had 680 votes and Spokan Falls 563, reports soon leak out that Mr. Nosler is rejecting votes due to errors on the forms of the precinct officials. Now, Kellogg reports that 288 people are being disenfranchised due to minor errors that were not strictly in accordance with the directions. But the real reason they're being rejected is that they gave the majority in favor of Cheney and cost Mr. Nosler his job. Now, one of the canvassing board members refuses to sign off on the altered count, which gives Spokan Falls a 7-point lead. Protests soon come in from Spokane Bridge and Hangman Creek, both of which had a majority of their votes rejected. The Walla Walla Statesman newspaper from eastern Washington's largest city wrote a scathing criticism of Spokan Falls' handling of the election. Now, Francis Cook's editorial in the Times appealed to the people of Cheney to quit clamoring against the city of Spokan Falls. The issue will be decided in the courts. He's quite right on that fact. In December, the Northwest Tribune printed a letter from Mr. J.H. Wells of Rock Creek, who told of going to the would-be stolen county seat of Spokan Falls, where he was kicked out of a meeting led by James Glover himself. The voter claimed that Glover was trying to raise $600 in order to bribe the town prosecutor to defend the steal. And the writer ends his letter by calling on the people of Spokan Falls not to defend the steal of the county seat. So in December 1880, a probate court takes up the question of the county auditor vote. The judge rules that by counting all the votes, that Mr. W.H. Bishop had received a majority, and that the canvassing board decision is reversed by the court. Nosler responds in a letter to the Northwest Tribune defending the action of the board and its decision which kept him in office, even though the majority of the votes had in fact gone to Mr. Bishop. January 8, 1881, the prosecuting attorney, Mr. S.C. Hyde, went to the Spokane County Commissioners on behalf of Mr. Bishop and concludes his argument by saying, "The people have decided. Let their will prevail. Let us have a full vote, a free ballot, and a fair count, though the heavens may fall." After that meeting, James Nosler resigned as auditor, and William H. Bishop was installed and officially sworn in on January 10th. Also caught up in the scandal, but having nothing to do with it, you also had County Commissioner John Roberts and Sheriff Michael Sullivan sworn in as their full term. Now, the Spokan Falls attorneys are trying to block Cheney's efforts to be heard in court about the county seat location. And after several delays, a special session was set for February 28th. Spokan Falls requested a delay until April, but the judge set the date as March 7th, and also granted Cheney's request to compel Auditor Bishop to call together the two county officials and recount the vote. Spokan Falls files new papers to delay all of that and schedule a hearing for August of 1881. In February 1881, the Spokane Times reports that rooms have been rented in the Graham building for the county offices, and these offices were located in a wood frame building on the corner of Howard and Main. Now, we don't have any maps before 1884, and so this is Howard. So here we have Howard and Main, and one of these buildings over here was the location. I'm kind of betting that it's this one where the post office was later installed. Now, generally, either Attorney Hyde or Auditor Bishop slept in the building to guard the records. Now, on March 21st, 1881, Bishop volunteered to stay so that Mr. Hyde could go to the big social event of the year where Mr. Wright was having a wedding dance, and it brought out the majority of the town folks. Now, there's a gulch that comes up from Hangman Creek through Pleasant Valley, along the Spokane River, and along Main Street and up near the county offices. Men from Cheney, pre-planned or spur-of-the-moment thing, or just tired of waiting, came by horse and by team and wagon up that gulch and to the county seat offices. There's a bit of a debate as to location, whether they came straight up Main Street or whether they came kind of around this way along Riverside and then down to the county offices. There's some references to buildings that are later on but don't exist anymore as to the exact route of these men. Now, a night watchman noticed the men going into the county office, but he didn't really think much of it, and so he didn't say anything to anyone. Inside that office, Auditor William Bishop, Probate Judge A.A. Smith, and Justice of the Peace from Cheney, J.W. Still, recount the vote one more time. They confirm the totals from the original count as well as from the court count that had occurred. With the men here, Mr. Bishop certifies the election. Cheney has a clear majority. So, accompanied the men, they then load the county books and Mr. Bishop into their wagons. This time the watchman sees something going on and decides that he needs to report it. But by the time he finds people and returns, the men are gone. The second steal, or the steal from Spokane's perspective. Later years in interviews, Mr. Bishop claimed on one interview that he was in on the plan, and in another interview that he had been kidnapped by the Cheney men. So, with Mr. Bishop in the wagon, whether willingly or not, the men rode back down the gulch, across Hangman Creek, through the valley, and Marshall to Cheney. They left at 2 a.m., but the wagon broke down, and so they didn't get back to town until 5 a.m. The majority of townspeople were waiting at the Cheney City Hall. Again, we have no maps, but we know that City Hall was on the second floor of the Callaway building, which unfortunately burned down in 1883, so location is still a bit of a debate. Now they gave speeches, and a collection was taken up to pay men to protect the records. Formal resolutions were made about how Cheney had what was theirs and was going to keep it, followed by more speeches, and then finally ladies singing patriotic songs. In the Spokane Times is dastardly steal, with lots of name calling and a very colorful story, and naming people he thought to have taken part. Most of them denied it. Kellogg's Tribune, also with large capitals, says libelous lies, denies anything was actually stolen, and saying that the entire account in the Times was wrong. He acknowledged that the county seat books had been removed to Cheney, as was their proper place. Cook then responds by saying why the individuals had come armed and in the middle of the night if their actions were so regular. Laura E. Tyler of Cheney gave the best response in her letter in the paper. The people were getting tired of waiting for what they considered to be theirs, so a company of citizens organized, went to Spokan Falls, the sheriff and other county officers assisting, and they took the books and brought them to Cheney. Now, it has been said that Cheney stole the county books, but they took what they had won by a legal majority of the voters of Spokane County, and they went in the night to prevent a fight, which no doubt would have resulted in bloodshed. Very quickly erected a county courthouse and a county jail on land that had been given to them by the railroad. The court cases continued. One attorney demanded that Mr. Bishop either return the books or appear in court in Walla Walla. Mr. Bishop went to court, and the judge ruled in his favor. This is on the block of 4th Street between College and D Street, where today the old 1930 Cheney High School, today's Schoolhouse Lofts apartments are. In June of 1881, the Washington Territorial Supreme Court ruled in Cheney's favor, putting an end to the court cases. All of the county officers moved to Cheney, except for Mr. A.M. Cannon, the treasurer, who refused. He was about to be removed from his office when he decided that he would instead appoint a deputy to do his business at Cheney. This is an 1884 drawing. The Northwest Tribune noted on December 23, 1881, that Cheney now boasted 1 bank, 2 hotels, 2 livery stables, 3 blacksmith shops, 2 drugstores, 2 physicians, 4 attorneys, and 2 justices of the peace. Being the county seat definitely brought growth. Businesses and residents, more hotels and lodgings, and agricultural businesses. There was more activity in Cheney, horse shows, firemen's tournaments, and visits from nationally known suffragettes and nationally known temperance workers came to speak in Cheney. This is a 1884 map of the downtown area. There are lots of hotels, the Hearst Hotel, the Commercial Hotel, the Oaks Hotel, and Revere House Hotel. There are lots and lots of saloons all over town, at least one on every block. But we also have at this point the Northwest Tribune office here on D Street under the today's City Hall. And then down at this end, we have the Cheney Sentinel newspaper. So again, we have lots of hotels, lots of businesses. The district soon boasts that from Union Street over on the west, all the way over to A Street, there are businesses in the downtown area. Yes, being Spokane County seat helped Cheney boom even bigger. There are changes that come along that set up a new county seat contest. In 1883, Spokane County gets divided. And so what was that very large county is divided. First, Lincoln County is carved out, then Douglas County. At the same time, we also have Whitman County and Franklin and Adams County carving out of this space. The railroad is completed, and year by year it is being improved for better and better transportation. A permanent bridge is built over Hangman Creek, and the hill going up into Spokan Falls, that road is all regraded and improved, making that journey much easier by wagon. We also have gold discovered and mines established in Idaho, with rail lines that are going directly to Spokan Falls, bringing even more wealth and more population to that city. There are rumors that James J. Hill's Great Northern Railroad is coming soon, and that he will be establishing a rail yard on the east side of town, which he does, which is where we get Hilliard from. Now, Spokane's population grows to 6,000, while Cheney does have a boom and reaches 1,500 people, a feat it won't do again until the late 1930s. It's still much smaller than Spokan Falls. Now, Cheney remains a very important shipping point, very easy access to Cheney, but it no longer has all of its strong advocates from the railroad. So there is a new vote of Cheney versus Spokan Falls. This was considered a rather irregular election, and there were issues that probably should have been taken to court. Why? There's no provision in the state's constitution or the territorial constitution that allowed for changing the county seat. There was no petition of citizens, no initiative from citizens put forth in order to have a new election. What there was a whole lot of backroom lobbying that got a bill quietly passed in 1885, designating a new election in 1886. So that election is held, and this time Spokan Falls won by a clear, undisputed majority. Cheney had a choice, and there were some people who were advocating that they go to court over those irregularities about how this whole election was set up. But Cheney decided to accept the election results and instead focus on education and being an agricultural business hub. And so the county books were packed up and moved back to Spokan Falls in January of 1887. And so that is the story from Cheney's perspective of its brief time as a Spokane County seat. Thanks for listening. If you have any other history questions, leave them below in the comments and maybe we'll make a video about that. I also welcome your comments and any stories you may have about Cheney's history. Thanks. Bye-bye.